Welcome back to The Great Game. This is episode 37, and this is the first of a two-parter in which we cover Gencon 2024. Tony Doherty, friend of the pod, a regular recurring guest, and now foreign correspondent of the Dukes of Highland, or as I like to call him, the Duke of Highland, was attending Gencon and was kind enough to grab a mic and go along and get some interviews with people, both at the con and shortly after it, just to run through who they are, where their games came from, and how the con experience treated them. This episode covers a lot of games. Touched by Darkness, Pantheon, the mega game, Tony's project, It Came From the Skies, and Riley's recent pet project, Jungle, a mega game based on the board game Root. But also, for those who have listened to episode 36 with Riley and Trenton, we hear a little bit more about Pizza Party. So if you're interested, stay tuned. This is the first of two episodes, like I said, so stay tuned for a second part shortly. And also just be wary that some of these interviews may be out of chronological order, so they may refer to each other backwards and forwards. Don't let that bother you. We've tried to keep the two parts of this double episode as equal length as possible, and so there's been a bit of chopping and changing. With all that said, huge thanks to Tony. Make sure you check out all of these people's projects. There'll be links in the notes below. And I hope you enjoy.
Hello, this is Tony from the Dukes of Highland. We are at Gencon 2024. I've just finished the game, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Right now I have Ben with me, and we're going to learn all about the game that he ran just yesterday? Question mark?
Yeah, I ran it yesterday.
Okay, tell me who you are and how you're associated with the MGC.
Hi, I'm Ben Canellis. I am a game runner and game designer with the MGC, so credits to my name. You probably played Councils of Poria or heard of it, hopefully. The game that we debuted here was Touched by Darkness.
Let's talk about Touched by Darkness. How many times has it been run before today? Let's start there.
Well, as Touched by Darkness, it's been run once before, but as the game that inspired it, Den of Wolves, many times has Den of Wolves been run at this point. So it's got solid foundation.
Cool. Den of Wolves. It sounds, I believe it's semi-related. Give me the elevator pitch of Touched by Darkness and tell me how it's related to Den of Wolves.
Well, I reached out to John after I played Den of Wolves at Origins last year, and I said, "This is an amazing game. I think we can package this into one single box, get it out there, get it around. Would you be okay with me doing that?" And after some discussion, he says, "Yes, as long as it's not in the Den of Wolves, setting." That was important to him. So I went ahead and I took it as far from sci-fi as I could, and you are in a dark medieval fantasy world that is being threatened by the Dark One and its everlasting eclipse. So if you are familiar with Den of Wolves, it has most of those mechanical underpinnings, but it is a new setting, a lot of development work to sort of simplify things and make things run more smoothly, and it has a control handbook sort of written with the first time controller in mind. It tells, not only does it tell you how to run the game, but it says, here's how to find spaces, here's how to find players, here's how to find controllers, here's how to train them. So it's basically, if you have been interested in running a game and don't want to do all the printing and all that, you can go to thegamecrafter.com where it is, and with one button click have everything printed and sent to you and get ready to run. So hopefully this will make the barrier to entry to running mega games in your area as low as possible.
That is amazing and something that we definitely need as a hobby, that we can press a button and all these components are done and you can just, in quotes, run it out of the box. I think it's an amazing idea. And Den of Wolves, obviously an amazing system. We've played it all a bunch and we all love it. Give me just a few changes mechanically that you've made from Den of Wolves to spice up your game.
I've simplified a number of the resolution rolls so that the D6s are sort of standardized between your military units, cleaned up a number of action cards and gave different action cards, turned the expanded rolls into actual rolls with briefings and extra materials that you can just introduce into the game just by giving to a player who walks in with a wait list and hasn't read the rules. give them one of the expanded roles. They're good to go. They can be the peddler. They get a deck of cards and they start selling things. So it's a lot of development work that I've sort of honed from my years doing freelance board game design and that. So I sort of took that type of eye of like, how can I make this the cleanest, easiest way to get this thing moving forward as possible. So all of the resolution is simplified so that the game gets out of the way and lets the players play.
That's amazing. It's just such a great thing for the hobby that we have that. Thank you for putting the work in. I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Tell me about the event. It happened yesterday morning, and I was playing in a different game at the time, so I heard some of what was happening, but I'd love to hear how your event went yesterday.
It went smashingly is the way I would put it. We had the full complement, so we had 46 players, so that was every single role filled and all of the special roles in there. We had, I don't want to give away possibly secrets of some of the briefs, but we had some interesting things leading to succession crises. We had cultists possibly tampering with evidence. We lost a chevalier who had draped himself in dark magic and then was surprised when their dark magic indicator proved him out to be one of the shadow agents working against everybody else. So it was good fun all around.
You are diving into the story, and so obviously there's maybe some spoiler territory here, but do you have a favorite moment of the day? What was your favorite moment of that event?
The cultists brought a prop. In this game, the cultists worship the night, and so they showed up with a book called Goodnight Moon. Maybe you've heard of it. And it was their holy text, and whenever they cast their secret rituals, they had players read from the book to the crowd, and it was always sort of a nice story beat. It sort of stopped a lot of people in their tracks, and we had a crowd gather to see what would happen when someone read from the holy text of Goodnight Moon.
Oh, Goodnight Moon. I read that to my children. There's balloons and cats and there's an old lady. I love that. That was the cult. Well, that's kind of heartwarming. Makes me want to be in a cult.
Yeah, if you accept the if you accept the sacred night into your heart, you could join them.
That's so good. Tell me some lessons learned from this run. I know you've played this before, but what was different to yesterday, and what lessons did you learn?
This is the largest run I've done without having surveys from everybody. So I would probably be less rigid about the roles of assigning roles as people come in because you put the people you think you can put in places, but then you end up with a lot of question marks from surveys that haven't come back, and you just sort of assign them and hope that they're going to be happy with that. And then they get in there, and you of course say like, well, if you don't feel comfortable, go ahead and swap your roles with other people. But that also means that they probably didn't read the player handbook, and they're unaware of what exactly the game is. So I would probably move the option of swapping roles to after the teach as opposed to something that I was offering as I was sort of marshaling players and getting them onto their teams because I think there was a couple players who were not in a role that was perfect for them. They enjoyed themselves, but they possibly would have been happier not being a leader of a faction or not being someone who was media who didn't necessarily want to be media. So that type of stuff happens. But it's a con and it was a full game, so it was less ability to juggle people about. So
Con games are notorious for struggling to communicate with our players. The Gencon system that we have is limited, and we've only had it for a few years, and a lot of players, they don't know how to use it, they don't know how to find their messages, they don't know how to communicate with us, so we have some slightly different challenges at Gencon than we would running it locally.
I 100% agree.
I think our Aussie friends would, I think they mostly run locally too, so this is one of the challenges of the big convention. Okay, so the future of the game. When are you running it next? And you already talked about that it's fully packaged, so it's available to buy from the Game Crafter. So yeah, when are you going to run it next?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow! Brilliant. Probably too late for the folks listening to this now, but running it with a whole new set of adventurers tomorrow on that is Sunday at Gen Con here in beginning of August. And then after Gen Con?
After Gen Con, my current copy is going to pass into the hands of Riley Nixon, who is going to be taking it out to the East Coast. So I think they have it set up to run somewhere out on the East Coast, as well as PAX. One of the PAXs it's going to show up. So
Unplugged.
yeah, that is the copy. If you play with Riley, that is the copy that was played at Gen Con, and I'm not worried about giving the materials away because I can just go on and click a button and have a fresh copy mailed to my house.
That is amazing. I'm so excited for that. I'm excited for you and to find out where it goes. Do you have a local games group you want to plug?
We are starting a Northeast Ohio Megagames group just on spur of the moment because we don't have a group, and we had the advertising ability with the Megagame Coalition here to tell people that we have a group. So if you get there and it seems kind of barren and haphazardly thrown together, that's because it is. Don't worry, we're going to be building things out, but we do want to get some games together and get things run for y'all.
That is amazing. Thank you so much, Ben. I think we'll cut it there. Any last words of wisdom?
Megagaming is awesome. It's a wonderful hobby. It hasn't gotten taken a hold here in the States, but I'm hoping that this game will be the first step to sort of expanding the hobby past the sort of boundaries that have sort of held it in place where it's been.
Amazing. Thank you, Ben. Hi, this is Tony from the Dukes of Highland and the MGC, the Megagame Coalition. This is about a week after Gen Con. As you're probably aware, Gen Con is fairly hectic, but we still want to talk to all the game runners that were at Gen Con, and today I'm joined by Pinto from up in Canada land. So why don't you give me an intro about who you are and what your associations are?
Hey Tony, I'm Pinto Town. I'm relatively new to Megagames, but after attending Gen Con last year on the 16-hour ride home, I came up with Pantheon the Megagame and was lucky enough to put it together and be able to run it the following year.
Did you get a chance to run Pantheon up in your hometown?
I certainly did. I ran it several times actually, with a couple times with a full crew, sometimes with half the number of players. It's designed for 30, but I wanted to make sure I knew what it would run at all different levels, even all the way down to just 2 players playing it. But definitely there were some fun run-throughs with the full player count. There's a pretty hefty gaming community up in Manitoba, and yeah, we had a good time with it.
Great. Why don't you give us the elevator pitch and tell us what the core gameplay loops are?
The deal with Pantheon the Megagame is that a creator has made a new fantasy realm with elemental mediums and unformed immortals, and then disappears into the cosmos, and all the players take on the roles of these unformed gods that form into groups of families and are left with the responsibility of continuing to build the world and the domains of their godhood. And over the course of several turns, till maybe the creator comes back and judges what they've done with this creation.
Give me an idea of how the game runs. Like, what are the players doing on a turn?
Well, the turn will begin with everybody drawing cards from a deck, because each group has a deck of cards that sort of runs what they're able to do and forms their pantheon. It's a little bit more structured than your regular mega game because it's set more as an introductory game. A lot of mega games have twice the players at 60 and have much more wide open rules that sometimes overwhelm new players or players that might not know what they're getting into. And so this is designed to just ease them into some of those more open-ended rules to a mega game. So each table has this deck that the players draw from that gives them options of what they're able to do. Some of them are very specific. Some of them are far more open-ended that let them think outside the box or the rule book, as it were. The turns, of which there are 5, go into phases. The first one is all the players replenishing their resources and drawing cards. The second one is called the realm phase, where there is a separate location or table with a map, and players draw hexes and start creating the map of this fantasy land that provide them with more resources to take back to their group. The third phase is the Pantheon phase, where they take actions either with their cards as gods or with their followers that they create on the map. At this stage, they're also allowed to run all around the room and negotiate with the other Pantheons and groups to make deals or other shenanigans they might get into. After everybody's used up all of their actions that they want to take for the turn, it finishes off with the Dusk phase, where players return to their table with their Pantheon, and the moderators give a general summary of the larger events that happen that turn, so no one in the game misses anything that might influence their next turn of play.
That sounds cool. Yeah, I remember you saying when you were first developing it that it was supposed to be like an intro. So it's a little shorter. What is the max player count? How long does it take to run? And I believe you run it 3 times at Gencon?
I did. The max player count was 30, so it was 6 different groups of 5 for different Pantheons negotiating and playing with and against each other. We had 4 moderators for those. 3 moderators took control of 2 groups each, and then we had our 4th moderator just handling the realm map when people would come up and draw their tiles. And it ran very smoothly, so smoothly, in fact, that generally the game takes, with a full player count, close to 4 hours. And in every game, we were done early and played an extra turn after we talked to the players and said, well, we finished early. You want to keep going? And without fail, well, nearly everyone was very enthusiastic about it. So
yeah, that's fabulous. Well done. sounds really good. What lessons did you learn? And tell us how it was different at Gencon than it was running it up in Manitoba.
Well, that's definitely where the lessons came from, because in Manitoba, I am at least partially familiar with all of the players involved through conventions. It's a smaller community. And when you get to Gencon and the numbers that you're drawing from just rise exponentially, over 70,000 people, you get a wider variation of players that might have thinner skin or different triggers in certain issues. And I had to be much more aware of that. There was a lot more hands-on required at Gencon, just because they're strangers and you want everybody to be safe and have a good time. And that means that you have to keep your finger on the pulse of the game at all time.
Yeah.
So that was definitely what was different from playing up here.
Yeah, it's very different. It's I find community building like very core and integral to my local group, and Gencon's very different because you've got a pre-built player base that just turn up and play, and then they disappear back into the con somewhere.
Yeah, and you're dancing on your toes to make sure that everybody has that fun time, because people are different. People are very different, and
yeah, and
some people might be enjoying, others might not. So.
And there's so much to see at the con too. So like you end on time, and they just want to get off to the next thing.
Absolutely.
Tell me some of the best stories from any of the events. What stories came from them?
This is a bit of a cop-out, but I have to say I was blown away with all 3 groups. So there would have been 17 different Pantheons that were created at Gencon. And the creativity of the themes and the individual gods, because they create what they're the gods of, and what their team's Pantheon might have a theme for. All of the moderators were just blown away with the creativity that was coming to us. The one god that wasn't even part of one of the groups that I was controlling, it just stands out in my head. He was the god of mixed metaphors. And I didn't even think about it. And I'd go up and ask him what he wanted to do, and he would reply with a mixed metaphor, and it just blew me away.
It's fabulous.
It was so great. But a lot of them signed up to play as a group, but many did not. Many were strangers that would come together and still come up with just this fabulous theme where all their gods work together, and they just fed off each other. And out of 17 of them, I am hard pressed to pick out a standout. There were so many that were just fantastic.
That's great. Yeah, good for you. What's the future of the game? When are you next going to run it? Is it packaged? Are you going to turn it into a package and sell it as an intro?
I think I will, because I had some friends of my son do just incredible artwork for the cards and the tile and components. And when I made up prototypes, they're beautiful. They're fantastic. I'm very, very proud of them. And if it seemed to have a very positive feedback. And if I can package it up in a small enough package, maybe it's something I would want to spend some time kickstarting. But real life definitely takes precedent over that. But there are plenty of opportunities up here to continue to play it from time to time, and I'll certainly be taking advantage of that.
Is there one coming up that you want to plug?
I don't have one set up right now.
Not yet. Watch this space.
I'm coming up empty on that. Yeah, exactly. I do have. I did create a website for it at pantheonmegagame.com. I even make short little limited animation videos talking about different components of it from the point of view of Rogrog, a orc journalist that are fun. I do enjoy doing them, and I'm definitely going to be doing one of the games that were run at Gencon. I got some good video blurbs and feedbacks from some of the players, so I'll get cracking on that right away.
Rogrog is great. He reminds me of some of those like amazing internet sort of animated cartoons that we got in the 2000s. That's the kind of vibe that I get from Rogrog.
Strong bad kind of stuff.
That's right.
Yeah,
yes.
definitely
Brilliant.
Vibe.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and can't wait to hear about what's coming next.
Thanks a lot, Tony. Talk to you soon.
All right, I am here with Tony Doherty. He ran It Came From the Skies at Gen Con. Tony, do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're associated with?
Hi, Forrest. Yes, I am Tony Doherty. I started the Dukes of Highland way back in 2022. God, it doesn't sound that very far away, but we've just done a lot between then and now. I've been on a couple of podcasts in the past, so people can find out more about me from those. But yeah, we've been running the Dukes of Highland for the past 3 years. This year, when it's all said and done, we will have run 8 games this year.
8 games, Lord.
I know.
That's so many and yet so few. Talk a little bit about the history of playing, controlling, running, and writing mega games. I mean, at this point, you're an author.
Oh yes. Pre-pandemic, I played Watch the Skies and Den of Wolves, both at Gen Con in 2018 and 2019. I decided there was not enough games being run, so I wanted to run Watch the Skies here locally. I pulled along Forrest and a handful of other Dukes along for the first run. That happened in 2022 in March. I designed, with the help of the Dukes, to fill some of the gaps because I wasn't comfortable running it out of the box in Watch the Skies, so we ran it. We sort of renamed it a little bit, and then we ran it then, and then we ran it at Gen Con, and then the next year we did Den of Wolves, and Gods of the Ancient World was just last year. Oh my gosh. And then this year we've done all sorts. We've done It Belongs in a Museum, we've done Deep Haven, we've done Den of Wolves, we've done It Came From the Skies, I don't know, all kinds of things.
All the mega games. We've run all of them.
We're trying, yes.
Right. So It Came From the Skies is a little bit like your take on Watch the Skies. Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about that game and maybe how it's different?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So, as I said, I sort of did a lot of designing to fill the gaps from Watch the Skies, the package that was available to me at least 6 years ago now. And I ran it, and Jim Wallman, the designer of Watch the Skies originally, sort of messaged me via socials and said, this doesn't really look like my game anymore. And I said, that's totally fair. So I went back in, did a whole bunch more rewriting, and took out all of his original content and sort of built it from the ground up almost. And And so, yeah, we renamed it. It came from ... And then the idea is you can sort of plug in these different modules, if you like, to create the antagonist for each game. So we're starting simple with the first run, and we're going to use the old trusty aliens. And so the first one is called It Came From the Skies. And the idea is it's like this, black and white terrible horror movie from the 1930s. It came from the skies, that kind of nonsense. And then eventually you'll be able to plug in different things like another dimension or the center of the earth or all these different similar terrible horror tropes.
I see. So more to come in the It Came From series.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Excellent. So I think this was the first time you've kind of run your own version officially, right? At Gencon. So how did your event go?
Yeah, it was the first time, and I think the event went really, really well. Feedback was very positive, and it actually, at the beginning of the game, the first few turns were going through, and I just kind of sat there twiddling my thumbs, which is slightly nerve-wracking. But also it sort of shows you, if you get a really good, strong control team and you train them well and you sort of empower them to make decisions and they're comfortable with the rule set and all that, then they just run with it. So it wasn't really until about a third of the way through that I had to really step in and get involved with a lot of these plots that started to appear. The nice thing about Watch the Skies, somewhere like Gencon, is a lot of the mega gamers that are there specifically to play mega games, they want to play all the brand new stuff, right? They want to play things that they've never seen at Gen Con before. So when I revealed we were going to be running It Came From the Skies, I probably got about 50% of players that had played a mega game before. But the other 50% had either been dragged along by their friends or they'd found it in the event listing, and those are the people that you're really excited to have, because if you can hook those, they will return and return and return. So, and 50-50 is a really nice mixture too, because you've got the people that have played before who are doing the crazy stuff that are sort of really pushing the game forwards, but they're also bringing along all these new players that are really excited to see all the shenanigans that can develop. And so, this particular game went really well. We were pretty comfortable running it because it was similar to something that we'd run before. And by the end of it, it was just as fabulously crazy as any of the other mega games that we put on. So it was brilliant.
I love that. I think it's so important to have experienced mega game players there to help the other ones along. It's sometimes it can be hard to ask a control member a question, but if there's someone on your team who's there with you and you can ask them, that's a little bit easier for players.
Absolutely, yeah. In fact, it's a question I ask at the beginning of the game. I say, "Who's played a mega game before? Please put your hands up." And so, half the room put their hands up, and I say, like, if you have not got your hands up right now, look around the room and see who does, because they are the people that are going to be doing the really out of the box kind of things, and so you should get on with their good side, especially if you're unsure of what to do next, or it's the game's getting a little stagnant. Like, go talk to those guys and they will tell you the sort of things that are possible.
Definitely. Always a story to be found happening in the moment. Speaking of stories, what are some of the best stories from the day?
Well, it's long enough from Gen Con now. It's just a week or so since Gen Con, and I ran another game between now and then, so a lot of this is very hazy in my mind. But there was all kinds of shenanigans with the alien story, and I don't want to go into too many spoilers for future runs, but there was a moment that was particularly funny for me because I got to play very temporarily in the middle of the game. So one of the players, the human players, was convinced that they had an alien in their captivity, and they wanted to interview this alien. what they didn't know is this alien was not real. It was like an actor. And so the other team that was doing this ruse said, "We've got this actor that's playing the role of an alien. Would you please have this, in quotes, alien read from this script?" So I had this script in front of me, and I sat down with the media guy at the front of the room, and I told the room at the time, it's like, by the way, I will be playing the part of alien interviewee. And so I sat down, and the media guy is asking me questions, and I'm basically just reading from this script, and I'm doing it, as sort of woodenly as possible. Like, yes, I am alien, I am from planet blah blah, and it was just so funny. Every time he asked me a new question, I'd just go back to the top of the script and start reading all over again, as though there was this sort of weird language barrier, and it made for this sort of comedy, like slapstick piece in the middle of it. It was great. And then at the end of it, he's like, "Well, thanks for your time. Like, I am alien from planet." It was great fun. I had a lot of fun with that. And then later on, I sort of approached him and was like, "Oh, by the way, when you were leaving the alien interview, you noticed this weird prosthetic on the floor. Like, it looked like it fell off the alien." And of course, then he's super suspicious. And that sort of empowered him to sort of start looking for answers that why this alien was doing this really weird stuff. Of course, I couldn't ask one of the real aliens to do it because it wasn't a real alien, which is why I had to step in. Anyway, it was very funny.
Oh, that's so good. I was in the room when you did that, and I remember you did some like garbled noises as one of your answers. Oh, so many good
I think
moments.
wasn't it my name? He asked me my name, and I said it was
Oh,
blah, blah, blah,
yeah.
blah,
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Oh man, so good. How did this game differ from running games outside of Gen Con versus inside of Gen Con?
I've already sort of talked a little bit about the difference between new players and returning players. And so, in a lot of ways, the player base for this particular game was actually fairly similar. We have a core group of players that come to many of our local run games, and so they provide the experienced players. And then you've got a bunch of new players that I'm constantly trying to find, because in order to fill up a game in Louisville, or I have to advertise. Like, I'm not lucky enough that I could just put on an event and then it gets filled up. I know the guys in Texas they are very fortunate, and they just like announce something and then they fill up immediately, and I hate them for it, but that is not what we can do. So in some ways, the mixture of players is actually a fairly similar mix, at least for this specific game. In terms of the organization, there are pros and cons to running at Gen Con versus doing it yourself. Doing it yourself locally, of course, you have to do everything yourself, but you get to make all the decisions, so something to say about that and how nice that can be. Like, there's no committee I have to run through. But the advertising is just the worst part of Megagames. I hate it. So the fact that that is ready-made at Gen Con, and the fact that we sell out within, minutes, is just it's just a massive weight off my shoulder. And you can concentrate on everything else that makes a mega game great. You can concentrate on the components. You can concentrate on designing. You can concentrate on training up your team. So all those other things can sort of take center stage. And I like doing both. I like Gen Con for the community and the other organizers and designers. But I love Louisville because it's home, and you're introducing mega games to people that have never even heard of something like that before. So yeah, it's pros and cons.
Definitely. Where do you think this game will go next? I know we're running it in Louisville here next month, right? So it'll be run here again. But talk a little bit about your It Came From series and what the future is of that.
Yeah, so the goal with creating this was to have a solid foundation that I can run for years and years without a huge amount of tweaking. Den of Wolves is one that we do regularly. It's great. It's easy to run for us, but it is the same story. So there's only so many times I can run that in a single location, like Louisville, for example. Of course, if we go to a new location, Den of Wolves is perfect. You just roll it out, you run it, it's easy, and then in quotes easy. Everything's in quotes when I say easy.
Right.
But with this one, because it's got this sort of bolt-on storyline mechanic to it, it makes it so that there is variability to games. So no two games are ever going to be the same because I can just write a new scenario. Of course, the aliens. My plan is to have at least 3 alien scenarios, and so once you've got 1 or 2, the third isn't too difficult because you've already got all the mechanics for the aliens in place. But the next one that I'm gonna run probably is gonna be it came from another dimension, and so I have this idea in my mind where you have almost 2 full competing main Earth maps. So you've got the regular Earth map with your 8 to 10 player countries, and then behind the curtain you have another map with a handful of other player countries that are doing where the world is in a different state. So, for example, if something that I really like is Man in the High Tower. Of course, I don't like the world because it's horrendous, but Man in the High Tower, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's what would have happened if the Axis powers had won in World War II. What would be the ramifications of that, and what does the Earth look like? Well, it's basically split into 2. It's split into the Nazis and the Japanese, and then with a hand of rebels here and there. So that's totally doable in a mega game. So in one world, you've got all the nations as we know them, and in another, you've got the Germans and the Japanese and some rebels. That's 3 factions. So, and then you've got this tear that appears between the 2 worlds, and how do the 2 worlds cope when they see each other? So that's my thought process for the next one that we do. I don't know when it's going to happen. I haven't decided what's happening next year at all, but it's definitely it's something that probably will happen in the next couple of years.
One mega game at a time, right?
Oh my gosh!
Hard
I
enough
wish.
to coordinate one.
Yeah.
So good. I love that that reveal in the middle. I know we have talked about a Den of Wolves kind of situation where you have a different segment of the fleet shows up
A
halfway
Pegasus
through.
fleet. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Pegasus. Thank you. That just seems like such a cool idea. I can't wait to see those ideas get off the ground. All right. So, what's next for your group? I know we talked about September, but and looking forward, anything else you want to call out for Dukes of Highland or the Mega Game Coalition?
Well, the Mega Game Coalition is doing a whole bunch of stuff in the northeast of the country. I believe they're going to have a fairly decent-sized presence at PAX U, PAX Unplugged. The Dukes will not be part of those. It's a bit far for us, and we've got enough stuff going on. In terms of the Dukes, like you mentioned, we have It Came From the Skies happening at the end of September here in Louisville. It is the same scenario that we ran at Gencon, so it's nice and polished. It should go really smoothly. If you played at Gencon, you probably don't want to come play with us in Louisville. Or if you do, we're going to put you on the alien team because you kind of have a good idea of what the story's going to be anyway. You'll just see it from a different perspective. And then next year, this time last year, I was working on what the year would look like, and I haven't got that far yet. I've got some ideas of some games that I'd quite like to run. I've got a couple of designs in the hopper, but nothing announced, nothing solidified. We've got some playtests for a design that I've got in the works coming up here in a few weeks with Forrest. You'll be in that, I think, and then some other.
I think I've seen a map.
Oh, you've seen one of the maps, yeah. So mum's the word on that right now, but I don't know is the short answer. We'll have to watch this space.
Great. Well, thanks, Tony. It was great to hear about how Gen Con went.
Thank you, Forrest. I appreciate you swapping seats with me.
Yeah, definitely. All right, see ya.
Thanks. Hi, this is Tony again from the Dukes of Highland and the Mega Game Coalition. I'm here this time with Riley Nixon, and why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes, my name is Riley Nixon. I am the designer organizer of Philly Mega Games, and I am also very active in the Mega Game Coalition here at Gen Con.
You have been a member of MTC, maybe one of the founding members, I don't know, for many years. Tell me your history with MTC and your local group that you just referred to then.
Yeah, so I'm technically not a founding member. I joined a couple years later, but turnover in the community is high, and I have since become the oldest serving member still active. So, yeah, I think I first got involved around like 2016, I think, around then. And yeah, people were still running mainly Watch the Skies, and it's been an honor and a pleasure to see that grow to Watch the Skies plus a bunch of other games.
You ran your game yesterday, I believe. Tell us what it was called, and then give us the elevator pitch for it, please.
Okay. Yes, I assume you mean my mega game and not my wonderful one-page RPG that I ran on Wednesday called Pizza Party, which I will mention briefly so we can skip over it and get to the actual conversation. Yeah, which if by the time you're hearing this, hopefully there will be a copy out if you're interested. But it is a one-page political satire of coalition building. So instead of arguing over political positions, you're arguing over pizza toppings. And during the game, you can do two things: propose a final pizza order, or kick someone else out of the pizza party. So that's the entire pitch of that. And now we're going to go into the real thing.
Before we do,
okay.
There was a lot of concern with Pizza Party because people were expecting pizza. You can't call something Pizza Party at Gencon and then people turn up with no pizza. What's all that about?
Yes, indeed. So there was an addendum added by GenCon admin, which is a very rare occurrence to the description of the event, that clarified there is no actual pizza at this pizza party, which I think is hysterical. So we didn't get any. I didn't. At least no one audibly voiced their displeasure at the lack of pizza. But yeah, we had a great time. It was a free event, so people came, had a great time, and yeah, I'm very happy with the results. So now I'm going to talk about the mega game. Okay, so the mega game I ran of my own design, because I'm also running another one tomorrow called Touched by Darkness, which I'm sure you'll talk to Ben Canellis about. I'll let him do the talking for that one. So my game is called Jungle, and it is heavily inspired by the board game Root, which is an asymmetrical board game inspired by the Coin series, which stands for counterinsurgency. And it essentially takes a lot of those asymmetric mechanics and puts them into kind of a very, very charming, family-friendly aesthetic. So it's very brutal themes and actually fairly brutal mechanics if you play the board game, but it's all through the lens of these very charming, cute art of anthropomorphic animals. So I tried to channel that energy into this mega game of making like what is a fairly brutal mega game about colonization, extremism, asymmetrical warfare, but everyone's animals, and like people are wearing giant parrot feather hats and stuff like that. So you can, it's a great way to explore such extreme topics.
Yeah, and you playtested this last year. I believe that was a really great success. I'd love to hear two things. One, what did you change from last year? And two, talk about the core gameplay loops in this.
Yeah, so in terms of core gameplay, the game is an engine for negotiation. So people are constantly negotiating between these factions, all of which have their own ideologies and all of which have their own motivations. And within those factions, most of them also have several sub-factions that are also negotiating with each other. For example, yesterday we had a coup like an internal coup within the Bird faction. Which is notably fractious, and there's also there's internal fatuations within all the factions, which is 10 out of 10 mechanic in my opinion, although that may turn off some more communal oriented mega game players. So what was the question? I'm so sorry. Core gameplay loop, yes. So but the actual core gameplay revolves around moving resource cubes around the board. So I really like games with kind of hindered movement mechanics that slow down kind of either the spread of traded kind of mechanical resources or can limit who you talk to. So in a previous design of mine called Sickle, we had tape on the ground, which broadly represented the borders of nations. And so once per turn, you could cross one border and like go into that nation, and then you were there for that turn. And if you wanted to go farther, you could then cross a second border the next turn. similar to that in this game, we have clearings, and then in between those clearings is tape on the ground. And so once per turn, you can walk along the tape between these clearings. So there are movement rules that kind of help or hinder that, and there are also movement rules around moving resources between clearings. To get at what I've changed from the playtest is I kind of I overhauled the resource movement rules to clarify a lot of stuff, specifically around the ownership of resources. The playtest, I kind of went into it somewhat idealistically. The rules around the movement of resources and the ownership of resources after they're produced, because you end up handing resources off to other people a lot. And so if no one from your faction is in a neighboring clearing who owns his resources, it created a lot of issues naturally. And I went in with the mindset of the playtest being like, the players will figure it out. No, that is the wrong mindset. That was essentially the number one feedback that I got, was like, this all needs to be kind of like just a little bit more polished in that regard. And other than that, the playtest actually went really, really well. It's funny, between the playtest and the first official run of the game, the playtest players came in kind of open heart, like, what's that Friday Night Lights saying? Open heart, full mind, can't lose, or something like that. Very optimistic and like really determined to have fun wherever they could find it. And for a lot of them, it ended up being not only obviously the mechanics were also fun for them, but it ended up being more the role play dynamics. So leaning into it. Now that I run the first full version of the game, we had an entire new crop of characters, come in, many of which, they don't go to playtest, they go to the actual game. And they were a lot more focused on the actual mechanical aspects of the game, which, thank goodness I polished those, because they certainly needed it. And they still had fun. So that was great. Obviously, in both games, you still had mechanics and, role play negotiation. So there you go.
I am fascinated with the way that Megagames can use the physical space. So I think that is something for another podcast. You're hearing this, guys. You should definitely talk about physical space and how you can use it differently for Megagames specifically. Tell me about the actual event itself. How did it go? How did the players receive it?
Yes, so it was 36 players, 32 showed up, which is kind of weird for a first mega game of Gencon. We had 4 players who just straight up did not show up. So we were like one half of a faction down, because they all ended up clustered in a single faction. So that kind of, it weirdly distorted some of the intended kind of role-playing gameplay mechanics, but it all ended up kind of averaging out in the grand scheme of things, because, in a mega game, there's great flexibility of, there was that, I think it was actually the designer of Root who kind of at one point controversially said that balance in games don't matter, because you can always counteract mechanical balance with social balance, or at least in so many words that's what he was getting at. And mega games are like the prime example for that, right? Is if one faction is getting ahead, you can always dogpile them, right? And if they're really getting ahead, there are the moderators to kind of kneecap them if like necessary. Yeah, game depending and all that. I think I got off topic again. What was the question? How did the event go? Oh, the event was great. Yeah. All the feedback that I got was great. I think there was a couple of players who were somewhat less engaged than the others, but even then, I think they still had a good time. Lessons learned. Yes. So if I run this again, I will definitely polish some of the mechanics questions around resources and resource ownership a little bit more. I already have several ideas with that, but I think my main lesson learned with this is actually in the prep leading up to Gen Con, and not dealing with the actual mechanics, but how I handled the stress of Gen Con leading up to it. Yeah, I am getting another hobby. I'm determined. I really tunnel visioned myself with this, which is ironic because I now have 5 games planned in Philly and PAX Unplugged. So and if you're listening to this podcast, you should come because it's gonna be awesome. But I'm gonna pick something else up.
Wow, I've not heard that before. Mega games are great, but I need a new hobby. That's so funny. Tell me about the best stories from the day. What really stuck with you as something that was just magical or funny or combination of all?
I mean, my personal favorite aspects is when the players are leaning into role play stuff. So kind of the on the fly alliances that would form, or the formal alliances that would form. Especially dealing with stuff like kind of like physically signing treaties and stuff like that are things that I find great joy in, because it takes a lot of extra effort to sit down and physically write something out. You can't just say it, you know what I mean? It's not the same. It's not the same thing. It doesn't feel the same, and it shouldn't be treated as the same. So some other highlights. So I'll give you some like gameplay highlights. So I play tested a new faction called the Navigators Corporation, which are kind of a mercantile faction. They're inspired by the kind of the Riverfolk Company in the Root universe. They're like turtles and gators because it's jungle themed, right? So I pioneered a whole bunch of new mechanics, and we only had 3 players show up of the 4-player faction, and they all had a great time. So that was like kind of a personal highlight of mine. But they really made a lot of money, and in a way that wasn't quite game breaking, but did like maximize their own mechanics. And then we also had a series of vagrants who are kind of inspired by the Vagabond faction in Root, if you're familiar. And they have some very powerful abilities around stealing resources and stuff like that. So they were constantly at each other's throat. So at the end of the game, the vagrants had stolen enough money to then buy a seat on the board to the Navigators Corporation, and they kind of merged into a single faction. It's kind of like an endgame epilogue thing, which is very charming. It's a very So the vagrants stole money from them and then offered to pay down their debts for a board seat.
Tell me, I know you have run at Origins in the past, ? And PAX Unplugged, ? Tell me what, and I'm curious, you've also run locally. I saw you do that earlier this year. What is the difference between Gencon and the other conventions and running at something out of your own pocket somewhere at a local place?
Yeah, the main thing is, so there are 3 issues when you're dealing with Megagames, right? Venue, and marketing. And there was a third thing that I had forgotten, but the main 2 are venue and marketing. And so Gencon solves both those things. If you have an established footprint here, which we do, thankfully, it worked hard to get here. Those early years were not great. They give you a venue, and you also have pretty much guaranteed marketing. You have to solve both those issues literally anywhere else you go, including at other major conventions, just because we either can't get advertising support, or just the people who go to those cons suddenly know so much less about Megagames than at Gen Con, which is wild because, you would think the people who go to Gen Con would be the same people who go to Origins, right? But no, it's an entirely different audience. So I went to Origins one year with the intention of running Megagames, and we ended up canceling 90% of our events because it was like, it was the years post-COVID, and there was all sorts of wacky stuff around Origins planning and the dynamics, and it's a troubled convention, but so we had to pull back on that. So I still have not successfully run at Origins. This year will be the first year that will be at PAX, and I am worried. Just because I'm not worried about the actual quality of the games. Like, the games are going to be great. I am worried that we might undersell, which is just a reasonable thing that you have to go in. This is just the risk of doing anything in a new audience. I think PAX and Origins are probably the 2 most natural outgrowths in terms of conventions that we can spread out to. But it doesn't make it easy,
I actually ran at my local convention in Louisville earlier this year, and we definitely did not sell out. In fact, they put us in the middle of a walkway, and so people were walking right through the middle of our game. So all kinds of challenges with places outside of Gen Con. All right, finally, tell us, what is the future of this game in particular? When is it next run? Is it packaged up? And what else have you got going on?
Yeah, well, I have, I am a perpetual designer, so I always have other designs going on. So I actually don't know if I'll run this game again. It went great, but it takes effort, and why run this when I can run other games of mine? I don't make games with the intention of packaging it up. This is a crippling issue within the Megagames sphere. I know, Tony, you feel passionate about this.
Think of the people.
Hey, if you want to run Jungle, you can reach out to me. I'll be happy to send you the files and give you a little brief. But I don't have the bandwidth to package this stuff up. For the other thing, it's only so I playtested it once and run it. Well, I playtested it several times and then run it officially once. That's not a finished game by any sort of game design qualification, right? Like what we're dealing with is still essentially a beta test at this point. So I feel like I'd have to run it several more times, especially for a game that's mechanically as complex as Jungle. If I were to package it up, I mean, the math is just not as simple as like Den of Wolves per se, where there's a simple in out. There will be 5 games run at PAX. We have 3 of them scheduled currently. I will tease those right now. So the first one, starting on Friday morning, will be the Generalissimo is Dead, which is a UK/Australia design, where it is a satire of the death of Stalin kind of scenario, but fictionalized. So there's a great dictator who has since passed, and there's kind of a power vacuum that leaves the rest of the state and government and like one state political party all in discomfort, disquiet, and uncertainty as what to do. It's a very conspiratorial mega game that is based around politics and negotiations and coalition building, and I'm really excited to run it. Mainly because I'm hoping to use that to inspire my own design called the Soviets, which is a very similar theme, but hopefully with more kind of historically accurate variants involving the Soviet Union post-Stalin. So, yeah. So that is going to be a great game. And then Friday evening is going to be Watch the Skies, the classic. We don't know what variant we're going to be running yet, but I do know one of the best organizers in the business that I know of. He's pretty new on the scene, but the stuff that he's done in the past has been pretty excellent. His name is Josh Krieger out of New York City, and he's going to be coming down and help with that. So it's very exciting. And then we're still working on our final games for Saturday. I have some ideas, but stay tuned if you want to learn more for that. And then on Sunday, we're going to be running Touched by Darkness, which is the updated fantasy Den of Wolves by Ben Canellos, who I imagine you've already talked to about this. So it's going to be great.
Thank you. Give us some final words of wisdom.
Come to Gencon. Duh. If you are on the East Coast, come to PAX. Like, let's hang out, let's talk. I guarantee you'll learn a lot. I am more than happy to work with anyone. Since talking to people here, we've since agreed to run games in Richmond, DC, and possibly New Haven, Connecticut. So it is a potentially exponentially growing community out in the East Coast, and I want you to be a part of it if you're out there. So please come to PAX and please maybe help me run a game or two.
There are definitely more mega game groups on the East Coast because of Gencon. It's such a great community, such a great hub for that, and we need something on the West Coast like that. So if you're listening to this, come to Gencon, learn some stuff, and then take it home. Thank you very much for your time. We'll speak to you